All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tackling one of those questions you've probably thought about, but, maybe never said out loud. And we're going to use it to unpack a huge planetary concept. It's a little quirky, it's definitely scientific, and it all starts under the covers.
So here it is. Can you actually fart under your blanket to stay warm on a cold night? It sounds ridiculous, I know, but it's a thought a lot of us have had. And believe it or not, there's some real science to unpack here.
And this gets us to what we'll call the blanket fart myth. You know the scenario. You're all bundled up, it's cold, and then it happens. You feel this little puff of warmth, and for a second, you think you've created your own personal little heating system.
Right? This is the thought process. For a fleeting moment, you feel like a genius who has hacked thermodynamics. But, as we're about to find out, the laws of physics, well, they're not quite as impressed as you are.
Okay, so let's get into why this whole idea falls apart. It really comes down to two main things. First, the sheer scale of what you're doing, or rather, the lack of scale. And second, a pretty common misunderstanding about how blankets actually work in the first place.
This analogy just says it all, doesn't it? The amount of heat and gas in a single fart compared to the volume of air under your blanket is, well, it's nothing. It's a completely insignificant contribution. You wouldn't expect to heat up a swimming pool by spitting in it, and this is pretty much the same thing.
And we can actually put numbers to this. Under a typical blanket, you've got about 50 liters of air. Your fart, it adds maybe 1/10 of a liter of gas. That is such a massive mismatch in volume. It's like trying to sweeten a whole pot of coffee with one single grain of sugar. The impact just isn't there.
So, here's the other crucial piece of the puzzle. Blankets don't keep you warm by trapping heat radiation like a greenhouse does. Nope, they work by stopping something called convection. Basically, your body heats up the air right next to your skin, and the blanket acts as a barrier, stopping that warm air from escaping and preventing cold air from moving in. It's an air trap, not a heat ray trap.
And think about it. Your blanket isn't airtight at all. It's breathable, so it's much more like a colander than a sealed Tupperware container. Any gas you release, including any methane, just seeps out through the fabric pretty much instantly. It doesn't hang around and accumulate, which is what a real greenhouse gas would need to do to have any effect.
Okay, so your personal efforts are underwhelming. But now, let's zoom way, way out. Let's go from the bedroom to the entire planet and talk about the real superstars of methane production, cows. Because this is where the scale of the conversation completely changes.
Just take a look at this number. One single cow can produce up to 500 liters of methane every single day. Remember our 1/10 of a liter? This is literally thousands of times more from one animal in one day. We're not even in the same ballpark anymore. And of course, it's not just one cow. There are roughly 1 billion of them on Earth. So now you have 1 billion factories, each pumping out hundreds of liters of a powerful greenhouse gas constantly. Now we're talking about numbers big enough to actually make a difference on a global scale. And here's a fun little twist. We've been blaming the wrong end of the cow this whole time. The vast majority of their methane comes out as burps, not farts. It's all thanks to a process in their stomachs called enteric fermentation. You can think of their gut as this incredible microbial brewery, breaking down tough grasses, and methane is basically the exhaust from the front. So yeah, the cows have been framed.
So now that we appreciate the scale of cow burps, let's look at how the real greenhouse effect actually works. This is the mechanism that a fart in a blanket can't trigger, but 1 billion cow burps can absolutely influence.
It's actually a pretty straightforward process. First, sunlight comes in and warms up the Earth. Then the Earth tries to cool itself off by radiating that heat back out into space. But greenhouse gases, like methane, hang out in the atmosphere and act like bouncers at a club. They block that heat from leaving and bounce it right back down, keeping the party and the planet warm.
And methane is a very effective bouncer. Over a 20-year time frame, one molecule of methane is about 80 times more powerful at trapping heat than one molecule of CO2. So not only are we talking about a colossal volume of this stuff from cows, but the gas itself is incredibly potent.
And this brings us right to the absolute core lesson of this whole thing. The difference between a funny little moment under the covers and a massive global issue comes down to one single crucial concept: scale.
This analogy says it all, really. Your fart under the blanket is a whisper. It's there for a second, it makes no real impact, and then it's gone. But the methane from 1 billion cows? That's like 1 million people yelling all at once, all day, every single day.
It's a constant, overwhelming noise that the entire system simply cannot ignore.
So let's just lay it all out, side by side, in the final showdown. The scale, personal versus planetary. The volume, a tiny, insignificant amount versus a massive daily output. The mechanism, a leaky blanket that can't trap anything versus a global atmosphere trapping radiation. And the final impact, absolutely zero versus a very real contribution to global warming.
So what's the crucial point of all this? It's that understanding our world so often comes down to understanding scale. The physics are the same, sure, but the impact of an action can be completely different depending on the sheer magnitude and accumulation. A single tiny event is just that, a tiny event. But a billion of them, happening over and over, well, that can literally change the world.